This week, not even week, part 2 of our candid conversation with star author of Longshot, How Political Nobodies Took Andrew Yang National, the new playbook that let us build a movement, Zach Graumann. And for those of you who are tuning in just now, you should know that part 1 of this conversation is the previous episode, so check that out. But because this book is so awesome, this deserved a double episode, and we are starting this convo just around when my presidential campaign starts to get its legs under it, and that was the beginning of 2019. Zach, what do you remember about the beginning of 2019?
We had known. So first thing I'll say, I got a lot of compliments on the first episode, the first part of this. So thanks, guys. Sounds like we are going back down memory lane a bit. But to answer your question, we knew we were getting on Rogan a little before New Year's, right? I don't remember when we found out. It was like right around then.
Oh, snap, you're right. So I go on Rogan like second week of February 2019, yes. And I find out about it maybe like 6 weeks ahead of time.
Yeah, so it was right in the middle of January. It was like, because we were trying to find out. So we'd gone Sam Harris like 7 months ago or so, and that was a good boon for us. We're like, so what other Sam Harris's are there? Was the plan. And the takeaway was like, it's kind of just Joe Rogan and a couple other big pods. We found out we're going on Joe, and we're like, hell yeah. And then we basically spent to zero.
It is really funny where we were so confident that Joe Rogan
I don't even want
was
to say,
going to catalyze the campaign that we just spent like the money was going to come in afterwards.
It was wild. In the sense that I think you were right. Yeah, you talked about this in the last episode. Like, if Joe Rogan doesn't do it, this campaign's probably gonna die, probably, and it's not worth splitting hairs over $10,000 or whatever we're talking about. But we basically stopped doing the traditional fundraising events, and we hoped that Joe Rogan would basically like 10x Sam Harris and give us a healthy runway. And that's what I remember in January, and it was we had kind of built the Yang Gang then. In terms of locking things down, we were, but we weren't really making any hires. We didn't have any money. We weren't growing. So I'm trying to think what January, it wasn't a slow month, but it wasn't.
When did they announce the requirements for the June debates?
So this is where we lucked out. I think it was February 12th, Joe Rogan happened. And 2 days later, they announced the requirements for the debate. This is where we got some luck our way, finally.
So here's something that has never before been revealed, I think. I don't know. So Joe Rogan's a big deal, but we're busy leading up to it.
Yep.
So I'm in a rental vehicle between towns in Iowa in early 2019. It's winter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, guys, like, let's just play some Joe Rogan episodes so I have like a sense of.
Oh, that's right.
Of
yeah.
that
So we went to Iowa a couple times in January, or Iowa, New Hampshire, yeah.
Yeah. And there was one conversation he had with Sam Harris, which was very helpful.
Yep.
When I realized that Sam Harris had been deeply concerned about AI before I came along, and said to Joe, it's like, look, someone has to try and prepare our society for AI. And so when he saw me running for president, Sam Harris, he was like, hey, this guy might help prepare us for AI. Like, let me try and help him.
Right.
And Sam was also the person who called Joe Rogan, by the way, and was like, hey, Joe, have Yang on.
Yeah, that was the genesis there. Yeah.
Yeah. So after I listened to that conversation between Joe and Sam Harris, I was like, oh my gosh, like Sam Harris has been kind of waiting for someone like me or paving the road, and now that I'm here, he's trying to pave the road further. Mm-hmm. And that led me to Joe. But hearing these conversations actually really invigorated me, because I was like, I am what this. Certainly what Sam was waiting on, and I thought to some extent what Joe was waiting on, and so my excitement level for it just kept going up and up, leading to the day of.
Yeah, and we had hoped. So we raised a good chunk of change from, basically people listen to the podcast and they donate, and so we were hoping that Joe Rogan probably has a 10x the size of Sam's audience or so, and so we were hoping at 10x the donations. And Joe was. I think he was hesitant because other people, he had a lot of fans that asked him to come on and stuff. I think he was a little hesitant on UBI. You had to sell him on it. But so we go to LA. I remember like driving around LA, getting like a smoothie, like making sure I always joke. We always called the candidate the baby Like, make sure the baby got some sleep last night. Like, baby's well fed. So I had to make sure I fed the baby before he had the big performance. But I'm trying to remember. So basically, Joe has this like hanger.
The man hanger.
Man hanger. It's pretty cool. And if you're with the guests, you sit in this like kind of waiting room and you can watch it live on the screen. It's pretty cool. Definitely the coolest podcast setup we've ever been to. And I'm sitting in there with one of his friends or something, and someone we brought along, whatever, and I'm watching the thing, and Joe pressed you on something like real hard. And if I watched the episode, I'd remember what it was, but he pressed you on something, and like my heart dropped. I was like, oh shit, did Yang, you were talking about, I think it was something to do with some sort of job displacement or whatever it was. And Joe like doubled down, was like, no, what about this? And my heart dropped. I was like, oh shit, Yang, like, please tell me you've done your research. And then you doubled down and pressed him back and was like, oh yeah, Yang came out swinging, Yang knew his shit. And then I was like, oh God, this is gonna go well. Because Joe did a really good job asking a lot of like the tough questions on universal basic income and your platform. So yeah, it went pretty great. And we raised a bunch of money real quick.
Yeah, it felt so. One of the things that happened in the campaign, this was not always the case, but Joe Rogan definitely was the case, where I kind of felt like the moment was important and was very, very present. I mean, if you can imagine me running for president, I had some weird interview all the time, every day, maybe like 4 or 5 a day. If you include events, maybe 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like I'm like 100% on each one of them. I mean, it's impossible to operate like that. But the Joe Rogan thing, that it felt historic to me when I went in there.
Yeah.
The same thing happened actually when I sat down with Sam Harris 7 months earlier, where I sensed, I was like, this is going to be really, really important.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if that process through which my thinking something is important was rational or conscious. It's almost like you feel like you feel this energy around it, and you're just like, oh. Now, I say that this didn't happen every single time, because there are times when, frankly, I didn't think something was important that turned out to be important. I was like,
should I care more about
that? But there were times when it lined up, and certainly that was one of them. And I got to say, the impact was immediate. Like, I would walk around the next week, and all of a sudden, my recognizability shot up. And I will say this to you all, that if you are the candidate, you can sense the energy around you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy around me just shot up, where if I just went into a random restaurant, someone would just look at me and say, like, hey, like, nice job on Rogan.
Yeah.
Like, things that were not happening at any time previously.
Yes.
Actually, before that, someone would come up to me sometimes and be like, hey, like, heard you on Sam Harris, I'm a big fan.
That's where, and I wrote about this in the book, Joe Rogan, and this is, I don't know his post-Spotify numbers because it's behind a wall now and there's not a lot of data you can get, but pre-Spotify, let's say, Joe Rogan was Game of Thrones, Sunday night, HBO primetime, every time he touched the mic, if not double or triple that, certain episodes. We're talking tens of millions of people watching his stuff every episode, not just at YouTube and audio. It's a joke when the mainstream media would call him fringe, or I mean, he's like you could take Tucker Carlson, Chris Cuomo, R.I.P. in terms of that show, and Rachel Maddow, combine them, and you wouldn't reach Joe Rogan. You wouldn't combine to Joe Rogan's reach. And we were. We knew this. We didn't know like what that actually meant in terms of practice. So what happened was, we remember just refreshing it. We're like, I think we raised $250,000 in a week, and it just kept going. But we lucked out. I mean, we went to In-N-Out after, which was great to celebrate, because we had like raised enough. We're like, we have money now. But the DNC shortly after this was our biggest stroke of luck. Like shortly after, like literally in the heat of the height of the Joe Rogan like hype train, was they announced that the debate requirements were to either get 1% in 3 polls that they had approved, or 65,000 individual donors. And so like all the Joe Rogan hype, we were able to just like funnel into, oh, you like the guy? Donate $1. And so we did it in a month. It was essentially exactly 1 month from Joe Rogan's appearance, and it was
and the announcement.
And it was wild. So I wrote about the book. Sam Stein who was a reporter at the Daily Beast. He's savvy. I like him because he was tracking, and he's like, one of the things we did really well was we measured real well. So we had a progress bar on the website. So if you donated, we could track, and the Yang Gang was refreshing that every day. You can see little Andrew move across the screen. But you'd have, he calls it like, I've been tracking you guys, and it looks like you're going to hit 65,000 donors any day now. Like, I want that story. And it's true. And the names were, like, it was this list. It was Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Andrew fucking Yang. And we were still a nobody. So it was wild to see, like, oh my gosh, this is real. It's very real. And now that everyone else is calling us an internet troll or that sort of thing, but at that point, we knew, like, this is real. This is going to be real.
And then after we hit the 65,000, we were like, hey, they're going to raise the threshold. And what was the next number they had?
120. It basically doubled. We doubled it, essentially. We boosted to 100, I think, before the first debate. 100,000.
Yeah. And then we were like, oh, well, we can hit that next number.
Yeah. Actually, they didn't. I think they moved it to 90 and then 100, 120. They kept moving it up. I don't think they exactly doubled it every time. It eventually got to 200,000 or so, 180, something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. So it was great because we gave the Yang Gang a very tactical way to support. Because getting people to register, vote hard, like donating $1, getting 10 people to donate $1, like you could get 100 people to donate $1 to one thing. If people on the street, right? And that's what was happening. And you were seeing these, like, you go follow online. It's like, I just yanged my cab driver and my mom, my grandma. It was like, I like almost cry thinking about it. It was so fucking heartwarming. And that's when I say, like, the only reason this existed was because of the Yang Gang, because of the supporters. That's not a lie. It's not a bullshit, like, puff piece. That's true. Like, we had to do it through, like, a grassroots movement, and it was the definition of that, you know.
Yeah. So between February and June, energy is picking up. We do a CNN town hall.
You do all the pods too. You do Breakfast Club, Ben Shapiro, Pod Save America eventually, Pre-Parara. You did a whole bunch of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So spring 2019 is when we're rising and becoming more serious.
We basically went on like a national tour from Joe Rogan in February through the first debate. It was probably really April through May. We went on tour like a lot. We did all those big rally shots you see. The vast majority were before that June debate, and we burnt everybody out, because we were stupid about it. I optimistic about it is probably the better word. Like, I think we were like, now it's time to go, when we had been grinding for a year and change. You know, that was probably the biggest one. That was because by the time we got to the debate in Miami, you were sick. You're sick as a dog, like, going into there. And we hadn't figured out, frankly, from lack of experience, like, how to rest you. Like, we thought, like, oh, time with the family, he'll be able to, like, relax. You got 2 little kids, man. It's not a relaxing moment. It's like more stress. So anyway, we ended up heading to Miami.
You know what you love to do? You know what I love to do? You know what you do for 6, 7, 8 hours a day or night? It's sleep. And because we love to sleep so much, we really should be paying attention to the mattress that we're sleeping on. You can get a mattress that's personalized for you, your body type, your sleep preferences at helixsleep.com. You can take a 2-minute quiz and they will send you a mattress risk-free. Don't take my word for it. Helix was awarded the #1 best overall mattress pick of 2020 by GQ and Wired magazine. It's recommended by chiropractors and doctors as a go-to solution for improving your sleep. Just go to helixsleep.com/yang, take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they will match you to a customized mattress. 10-year warranty, 100 nights risk-free. I know it would be weird to return a mattress at night 99, but you can do it. Helix even has some financing options if you want to do some kind of layaway action. And Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/yang. Get the mattress for the sleep of your life, helixsleep.com/yang. Yeah, so I was sick. I had this really, really nasty summer flu bug. I do think it was tied to the fact that, like you said, we've been just grindy for months.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like I get there and I'm just like, ugh. And that first debate goes badly. We managed to survive because of, and you say in the book, and I actually didn't realize until I read your book, how much my not wearing a tie apparently seemed to like help deflect a narrative in a certain direction.
There was that, and then like the microphone being off, which helped.
So the struggle for me was that is your first debate, so you think, oh, like what the hell's going on? It turns out this MSNBC are just really like, you know, jackasses. And by the time the MSNBC moderated debate came up the next debate, which was like the 5th or 6th, I was like, they're gonna be jackasses.
We knew what to expect.
And then they were jackasses, and you were like, well, that was like they like didn't ask me a question for 32 minutes. Like the whole thing.
The second one, yeah, it was awful.
Was madness. But the first time it was one of one, so you're like what the hell was that?
And the other thing is like, well, I mean, how are you supposed to? You really how is one supposed to know how MSNBC is going to treat you? Because there's not tape to review. So the last presidential, you're going back 4 years, right? And so the last presidential was 3 candidates, right? They're all getting some relatively substantial airtime. There hasn't been this crowded of a presidential debate in the modern era ever, right? Yeah. So there was nothing to compare it to. It was just the Republican debate, which was Fox and CNN. And Fox is relatively fair. Like they, I thought they did, having watched a bunch of those debates, they did a good job letting everybody get in, and especially, you know, weighted based on polling.
So that first debate, we are fortunate to survive.
You're sick, trying to have a coughing fit. Mic's off. You're not wearing, but not wearing a tie worked really well.
Yeah. So one thing I did not realize also until reading your book, was I supposed to wear a tie? Because I had thought I wasn't supposed to wear a tie the whole time.
We had loosely decided, like you had said, like game time decision. You as a candidate, you're like, all right. I get what you're saying. But you were like, but like the team was like, Bay's job of interviewing the world, like we should really consider a tie, and that'll show like good for our fans. Like Andrew's gonna take this seriously. We didn't think our fans would mind, and we thought everybody else would mind. But we weren't like sold. But we had like gone like you're probably gonna wear a tie. I brought 3. I wouldn't have brought them unless we were gonna do it. And then I remember very clearly like holding it up and you're like, fuck that, I'm not wearing a tie. You could barely like you had a fog around you. You had this like fog. And I remember we did Barstool Sports was doing. They had like a political podcast, and we did that before the debate with PFT, one of their hosts, and it would be normally like a pretty big podcast, so like excited about, and you were like dead. You're like we're cutting this short, and I don't think you've ever cut an interview short like that before. And so in hindsight, we should have rescheduled that, but again, like we learned a lot. We both learned like a lot of stuff on the fly.
And, you know, I'm going to say something too that this is going to be like somewhat distinct, maybe. So my brother had me read a book called Dances of Intimacy like years ago, and he said that in relationships you have overfunctioners and underfunctioners. So this is in families, in a romantic relationship. And so you think of overfunctioner as good, underfunctioner as bad, but the problem is that overfunctioners end up, they end up cultivating underfunctioning in the people around them because they're kind of overcompensating. So if you imagine like the super like overachieving older brother, and then maybe the younger brother ends up being like a slacker layabout rebel in part because the older brother is like kind of
sucking that energy
and like filling that role.
Yep.
So it was, you know, it was a fun book, but but in the business context and certainly in the context of this campaign, like I was like this like stoic overfunctioner where it's like, well, I'm just gonna like battle, and we're gonna like, you know, do the impossible together and the rest of it. And so I was just, you know, like grinding against the gears or like the tire. And so like if you have a more balanced dynamic, then at some point you're like, hey guys, like, you know, man, like maybe we should like take a little breather in here. But that's not like the overfunctioner way.
You said a lot. You said yes to almost everything generally.
Yeah, and so overfunctioners,
at least from events.
So
you know.
So there's a common thread too, like overfunctioners in entrepreneurship, because there are like a lot of these like kind of, you know, test your limits, like push types in entrepreneurship. And for me, romantically, and in terms of my personal relationships, like it took me until I was older, because what would happen was I'd be with someone and then, like, you know, it's like I was not able to express needs and vulnerabilities in like a healthy, productive way,
Mm.
which, by the way, I'm still not excellent at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but I think that the fact that it really took you at some point just being like, look, guys, like Yang needs a break. Like, like in a healthier thing, maybe I would have been like, hey guys, like I could use a break. But it wasn't in me to be like, hey guys, I could use a break, because you're like surrounded by a bunch of people and you feel like, okay, like I got to work harder than them. So they're working this hard, I have to work harder.
Yes.
Like et cetera, et cetera.
I have a funny story on this. It's going to fast forward, but it's a funny story. I've only seen you that sick twice. So I write in the book, like you were notoriously, like your reputation from people I talked to since I met you was that you just don't get sick. You don't take 6 days, which is generally true. Like you're pretty much just a go. But you got deathly sick twice on this campaign. One was right before the first debate, and the other one was right before election day. Great timing. But you were, so you're dead. I talk about this a bit, but you're dead on the bus. And we'll talk more about the bus, but you're dead. You're lying on this bus. We're driving around Iowa days and days, and you're like, you can't put your contacts in because your eyes are all swollen. So you're doing the events, you call them Daredevil style, like blind. You can't see anybody. You would do an event, you'd get on the bus, take your shoes off, take your jacket off, put it over your head, and pass out for 2 hours, and then to be nudged by someone, begrudgingly wake up and do the same thing. You do like 4 or 5 times a day. It's the worst way to recover from whatever sickness you had. There was a guy who you know it is. I'm gonna name nameless, but I have to say it because the story's so funny. He's like a friend of yours, like a relative friend of yours, and he's like, he comes in and he's like, we're fucking here. We're here for the Yang. We're here to Yang. We're joining the bus. We're like, what? What are you doing here? He's like, yeah, Yang said it's cool. And he was like a friend of yours. Like, yeah, Zach, it's fine. So this guy's sitting there. You are literally like jacket over fucking head, dying of God knows what. And he's trying to have a conversation. He's on the bus, because you said he's a friend of yours. And he's trying to have a conversation with you. And I'm like, I think I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. I'm looking at the team like I'm going to lose it. I know you see me blow my gas once in a while, and I don't like yell all the time, but when I do, it's like a fucking ordeal. I'm gonna fucking lose it. And they're like, oh shit, stay away from that. So next stop, I like pull him over the side, and I was like, you're getting off this fucking bus. What the fuck are you doing? And he's like, how do you see this playing out in your mind? The man is literally, he's running for president, and he's literally dead right now. And the guy looked at me, he's like, well, I know, I thought we'd come hang out in Iowa, and like, good to see him, maybe get dinner after. And I'm like, what do you think this is, a fucking rock concert? It's like a band tour, hang out with the band? He's sick, he's got a 100-degree fever in there, he's lying, and I'm screaming at him right now. And what do you think, we're gonna go hang out at fucking Chili's? We're not doing that, get the fuck off the bus, I don't wanna see you again. So I'm screaming in a parking lot. And Sanchez, to this day, our press secretary, Eric Sanchez, anytime like something happens, he's like, what are we going to fucking Chili's? Like since then to this day. But yeah, we just left him in like Dubuque, in like the middle of nowhere. I'm like, you'll be fine. I don't care. So long way of saying it was a tough 4. By the end, we got better at managing it. But you were not particularly one to like you're gonna push the limit if you get the option, right? And it was towards the end.
I just think, like I can soldier through. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. The worst thing that happens is you die.
The worst that happens is just get sick.
You just die. Well, the other thing is like it's like, and this is one thing I learned in politics, like there's certain types of, and everybody's different, but there's certain activities that, an hour or 2 hours doing one thing is not the same as an hour and 2 hours doing another thing. And I don't mean like physical activity, but like in terms of mental energy.
Well, this is the thing that nobody knows except for candidates. And so you think to yourself, it's like, okay, like I can work long hours. But if someone sticks a mic in front of your face and then it's like, hey, you're going to say something, and by the way, if you like say the wrong thing, then we're going to like splay it on networks around the country. So you have like a certain form of mental exertion.
I know that feeling.
And then when you go in front of like a group of people, and then you give remarks and shake hands, and like they say to you like, hey, I really care about this, and you say like, oh, like
tell me more.
Tell me more, and I really want to do something about that. That's like a different form of exertion.
Yep.
And a lot of these things are kind of social or psychic or emotional exertions that tax you in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're frankly like just either like super duper extroverted or just a crazy person, like a normal human can't do that stuff for more than X hours a day without like messing up, burning out, like something.
Your brain starts to turn to mush over time.
Your brain starts to turn to mush, or you just, you start like saying gibberish, or like, or probably say the wrong thing. Like a lot of the things that you see from political figures, it's like, like a lot of them just get worn out at a point in time. And so like it's a different form of work. It's something that I had not anticipated even when I was deciding to run for office, because like, oh, this will be sort of like being an entrepreneur. It'll be sort of like starting a nonprofit. It's different because
to a point, and then it's not.
Yeah, it stops it being about that, because it ends up being much, much more personal.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we're scared shitless of right now is that we sense that our political figures are essentially becoming actors and theater performers.
And they are. They have to be. The system cuts them that way. And that's what you were. This is a good point. Like this was the transition for us. Like up to essentially the Miami debate, but definitely up to Joe Rogan. So the first debate, you were like a CEO. Like you were the front man, like doing that. But generally, like I had, control, and other folks on the team ran the operation. You delegate well. But at the end of the day, we were running through you, and we had to shift to you, the candidate, because the job is so hard. And the other thing is, you talk about, yes, you're exhausted, and you got people that came to see you for miles wherever they are. So you want to bring it for them. You want to be the real. You want to care about what they're saying. You want to take the good selfie. You want to give the good speech, the good interview, but you want to do the fundraiser well and raise the money. But then there's other things too, and we do all that, and then be like, okay, man, this next hour, you need to prep for this debate. You need to prep for CNN Town Hall. You need to read about the Middle East. You need to read about X, Y, Z. And like certain people, and you at times, was like, that's the last thing in the world you want to fucking do right then. Like I need to sleep, or I need to turn my brain off. Can we play video games? Like anything, right? And that's hard. And for us as an inexperienced team, this is a problem. I've worked now, talked to experienced consultants. They have the same problem, but definitely us from an inexperienced team, especially the younger staffers or folks that are not interacting with you on a day-to-day basis. We're like, why isn't Andrew doing this? Why isn't Andrew doing more? Like, you're fucking kidding me? Like, there's literally physically, like they don't understand the human toll of this, right? And certain people are wired a certain way, like. You're an introvert, right? So you're exerting energy when you're talking to people. Some people get energy, right? And if you're an extrovert, you probably have energy coming off a bus, and then you could do more work. It's different. But every candidate is different.
Yeah, I mean, I'd liken it to, let's say you had someone who was like a Broadway performer, and then they would have a show every night, and then they'd rest and do the rest of it. Like, would you have that Broadway performer do 3 shows a day, 4 shows a day? And then would you have them do 4 shows a day every day, and then do that 7 days a week, and then do that for like it doesn't make any sense, because you'd be like, no, I would have you do it like, once a day, and then I'd have you go do something else and blah, blah, blah. Yep. So when you're the candidate, it is like you're doing like any number of shows a day. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize too, it's like you think, I mean, all of my stuff was genuine. I mean, it was me. But there is still like that kind of like, okay, it's time to turn it on.
Yes, of course.
And I've been around now, like actors, movie stars, comedians, politicians, like countless TV hosts, and there is an on switch on just about everyone. Like no one acts like that stuff until the cameras is.
The number one thing I get from a lot of people when they meet you for the first time, like actually meet you, they're like, wow, he's just kind of the same guy you see on TV. And the answer, yes, you are on, you're more aware, but you're essentially the same human. That is not the case for the vast majority of TV hosts we work with. Don Lemon was kind of the same on and off camera, I found. And I think some of the CNN folks were. You know better than me, obviously. But there are folks, they just don't say fucking anything. And then bang, we're on, and they're like a whole new human. And I get it. Like I just imagine like the folks that, like, if you did the Today Show or something, it's like every morning at 4 a.m, like you're just a shell of a human being until the camera comes on,
The first time I was on live TV, I was very, very bewildered, because the people would just be like ignoring you, looking at notes, and then all of a sudden someone said notice, and then so you're sitting there and you're like, first time you're like, what's going on?
Yep.
Like, this, and then the camera's on, and then everyone's like,
Zach, we love you now. Yeah, it's awful. It's absolutely awful.
So the first debate doesn't go well, and then you make a command decision to be like, look, like Yang needs a bit of a break and then a debate training camp, which was fascinating in that we didn't have, I suppose, like professional coaches come in until then. And so leading up to the second debate, we have communications guy and like a substance and policy guy.
Yeah.
And it was like a revelation to me. I was like, oh my gosh.
We had to learn how to debate, like TV debate.
TV debate, which is not real debate.
We were a little arrogant in you got the message out every other way and every other format ever since
live
then.
event, podcast. I was like, whatever.
This is fucking different, man. It's like it's a reality TV show, as you said, but it's also this like ping pong bullshit. And if you get in, you got to be ready to take heat.
Instead of a debate, I started to see it as a competitive, distributed media performance.
And I mean, look, the whole thing's bullshit, and it does not correlate to being a good president, realistically. Except that you can handle a crucible, I guess, which is maybe that's a strong correlation. I'm not sure. But yeah, we put you through. Well, so I mean, this was not a very popular decision on the team. Like we didn't have a great debate, and we had one more to go. And I'm like, and we're going on vacation. But you got to make those calls, and this was needed. So you got rest. I got a little rest, but mainly got to build up a team, and then we put you through basically 3 weeks of debate hell. It wasn't hell. It was like 9 to 5. You know, we wanted you to stay a good sleep habits.
I actually felt really good during that because my schedule was more normal, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah. Yes.
And it was
summer. Here. It was summer.
I was away from my family, which had its pluses and minuses.
Pros and cons. Yep.
So going into the second debate, I'm feeling really good because, one, I'm healthy, and I was like, oh, this is better when you're healthy. But two, it was in Detroit, which I thought was a really good backdrop. I had a lot of friends in Detroit. I'd spent a lot of time there. I felt like I understood the Midwest and the issues, and it was very on theme for the campaign. But the biggest difference was that CNN moderated, and CNN was fair. They asked me automation questions.
Yep.
They
gave you some airtime.
They took it seriously, and I felt like, wow, this is a million times better on multiple levels. So
we had a glow up. We got you a haircut, new suit, if I recall. You look sharp.
Yeah, Zach started attending to a bunch of theatrical details, which, by the way, was good for my marriage. So thank you, Zach.
So that was the other. Yeah, what was the other? It was like, all right, if we're gonna. We learned everything the hard way, frankly, the first debate. And in round two, we're like, so I said, you can't bring fans. And then we got to the thing in Miami. So we followed the rules, like, all right, we're not going to bring fans. We got to Miami, and it's like a fucking home game for Kamala Harris and Warren. And I'm like, well, this is bullshit. So then we went to Detroit, and we brought the Scream team. Shout out Lacey and Pam and a few others. And they just went nuts anytime he spoke, which probably felt pretty good. And we were prepared. We knew what to fucking do. We knew how to, basically, you don't actually answer the question. You
have a bunch of points that you're trying to hit. And
deflect it and hammer your message over and over.
Yeah. So that was good fun. We had a closing that talked about how last time everyone was just fixated on my not wearing a tie. And
we did.
It's a reality TV show. Good
I
times.
called it the, what did I call it? But was it letting Yang be Yang? I can't remember what I called it. Yeah. But drawing back attention to the no tie, which is good. It was full circle.
Yeah, so that was July. And then shortly thereafter, we qualified for the September-October debates.
So we blew up a bit in July. Things are going well. We essentially get not a summer off, but it's a little more relaxed in August.
Well, just they don't have a debate in August, so we just did our thing.
A couple more rallies. Preparing for the debate, we're able to hire a South Carolina team and Nevada teams.
It is funny how, when I think about this time, my head naturally does go to the debates because they were monthly. They were something of a benchmark every time. If you didn't make it, you die. Even though we grew to realize that it's look, these debates aren't often very game-changing.
No.
Where even like the Kamala sticks it to Joe Biden, like that bump faded by the next debate, I think. So the debates were like not not as significant as I think we all like to hype them up to be. But I still think about them as
The first
like,
one or
in terms of
two,
the calendar.
I think.
And then you can do the counterexample where obviously like Bloomberg's debate performance was bad enough where the campaign can't recover. So there are instances where it's like, okay, like these debates can be important if you have like an outlier negatively. I would argue it's very difficult to have an outlier positively because
it is.
So you can have an outlier negatively,
especially the presidential, like the general election debates. It's like everybody's kind of entrenched, especially Pat. So I would say generally, I think it's a zero-sum game here. They're either massively useful because you're learning who the candidates are, and that's like kind of the best way they can do it. I think you should do podcast long form, but you would lose a lot of your viewers. But they're also a massive waste of time and money. So I think I would do fewer debates and a variety of formats if I was in charge. I would do one of these fucking crazy primetime ones, and then I would do like a long form one, podcast style, or like no audience, super long, like very chill, like a Joe Rogan type moderated debate.
I will say too that in terms of the energy around me and my recognizability on the street, the debates were a massive where like the average casual American
correct
saw something over the debates and was like, oh wait, like Yang, like so between Joe Rogan and the presidential debates, this is when I became recognized on the street.
We started taking off a bit. It's
Which,
like because
way,
20 million people, 18 million people watched the first two debates, essentially 18 to 12, and then there's millions upon millions of people that get the recaps.
And you talk in the book about our strategy in the Houston debate, where I vividly remember someone sitting me down and saying, hey, this debate's going to be really boring because ABC is really boring, and you're probably going to have one opportunity to make any kind of mark. It's probably going to be your first answer. So what do you think about us giving money away?
Yes.
And I think we actually ran through a number of different possibilities and then settled on giving money away. And then I became favorable. I was like, well, it's like it's on theme. Like, might as well just make this about what the campaign is.
So this was like the attention economy thing we're looking at. So we did some mock debates, and they were fun. And apparently this is novel, and it's shocking to me that we hired actors to play various candidates and rented an auditorium and simulated the actual debate. And then we did that for Detroit to really get them ready for that. And then we did it again for Houston, and that was the first like level up debate. It was only 10 candidates left, and they were all like, let's call it the pro debaters, and all had their own brands and political skill and followings. We're like, we're just gonna get lost up there. The same way everybody was. Like, it was just like no one's gonna get any love off this debate, really. So like, but we needed love because we were only at 2%. We needed to get more, and so we're like, what? We gotta do a stunt, essentially. What the fuck do we do? Like, we already did the no tie thing. We did the $1,000 a month thing. Like, there was, how do you differentiate? And we could, you go to your head, like, you could attack a candidate. It's not always great. Like, you look at the numbers and that stuff, it's not particularly awesome. Like, Tulsi Gabbard, for example, like, chewed out Tim Ryan, I think, in the first debate. Like, neither of them did great after that. Like, you could go, and some of these bigger candidates, they'll punch back a lot. Like, going after Liz Warren, you look at Bloomberg, like, that was not great. So being the free money guy, it was. And so we hyped it up. We gave away $1,000 to
a month to 10 different
families. And obviously we knew, I wrote all about this. Like, we knew it was a gimmick, right? We knew people would hate it. The pundits would hate it. But it was on brand. And we figured people would forget about it, that it was a gimmick, and you'd get your polling bump and you'd be able to keep existing for a while. And if people knew you as the guy who gave away money,
it's not bad. I didn't hate it. I didn't hate the Asian Oprah thing.
What was fucking crazy, dude, was, so the pundits like shat on us when this first happened, right? But I wrote, like, it was like 2 million people went to our website in like a matter of seconds. It was like the website almost, like, we prepared for millions upon millions of people to go to the website, and it broke for a little bit. There's that many, like, and this is Amazon servers. Like, they don't have that many people go to one website at one time, like, instantly like that. We were the third most searched, third most searched topic in the fucking world that night. Like we thought we had blown up before. No, we blew up, and that was when you like couldn't go anywhere without being recognized after that one debate. And what was fun was all the pundits who had talked shit about this debate strategy like changed their tune very quickly in like 48 hours when we announced how many people came to the website, how many donors we got, how many new emails we got. We raised a ton of money, and we bumped in polling. We qualified for the next two. It was like pretty much overnight, like bang, and then it was just like as if it never happened. Which makes me think in hindsight we should have done more stunts. But I don't know if it actually would have worked, but this one works so well. Maybe we should have tried to keep pushing the envelope. But the problem is, and we talked about this in this podcast before, is that if we were Republicans, it would have worked. More stunts would have worked because they hate the press. Only 75% of the Republicans don't really trust the media and mainstream press. 85%. Is that high? Jeez, I thought it was only 3/4. Jeez. And the Dems are what, 65? Trust it?
69.
69, yeah. So this is why you're the numbers guy. I get close enough for government work. But like Dems trust the press. So if they were shitting on you all the time, we didn't think that was a winning strategy. And sadly, it's probably right. So, but that was our level up. Now, at that point, dude, I thought after either July or September, we had a real shot to go on and win, which I know sounds wild, but I was under the impression, I don't know about you, I was under the impression the hard part was done. Like you were a thing. You know, like the hardest part was going from 0 to a contender, like top 10, top 5. The rest part, like winning, obviously hard, but if you did all that stuff before, that you're there for a reason, you're there because you have the potential to win. I thought that was a very logical conclusion to say, who the fuck is this guy? Like, right? And that couldn't have been more wrong. It could not have been more wrong. That's as far as we got, actually. The polling pretty much after that debate was as high as we went, even despite lots of ad spending.
Well, we got, so the next debate threshold was 3%, we qualify, and then 4%. We qualify, and we keep on rumbling along.
We rumbled. I mean, we got good polls then, so we had, for
a while. But to your
we
point,
didn't drop per se.
To your point, the problem really came in trying to transition to a broader appeal and base. And I remember you coming to me during the campaign, and you put it in the book where you're like, okay, there's the Yang brand, and it's fun, positive, iconoclastic, different, anti-establishment. Yeah. But these are Democrats we're talking about, and we need to try and broaden you to become more acceptable to like the average mainstream Democratic primary voter. Right. So what we want you to do is to strike a different tone, be more serious, and we're going to use this particular speech as the launching point.
Yep.
And I heard this and I said, makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then I
learned a great new speech.
Kids are not all right.
Great speech.
And then we debuted it in Iowa.
We got 1,000 people show up at that. Rivers Cuomo played and Weezer. We rolled out for this thing.
Yeah. We put a lot of energy into it. And I would say that speech, Evelyn was there, was one of the high points of the campaign still in my mind. Because I thought I did a really good job. I saw the other candidates, and I saw, frankly, myself, and I was like, I felt like I was one of like the top performances of the night,
correct,
so to speak.
I was getting texts from reporters and friends on other campaigns. Speech of the night. I put this in the book. Speech of the night. Wow, your boy came to play tonight. I'm in tears. It is a very good speech. It was a presidential speech in many ways.
And then afterwards, it was like it never happened. Like the press.
If you weren't in the room, it did not exist.
Yeah, and that was like
nothing.
A very, very strange feeling. And so this is when, and we talk about this in the book, where like that there was like a degree of mainstream credibility or acceptability that the press did not want to give us.
Correct.
And that was one of the clearest examples I remember, because I was like, look, I felt like I did my job.
Yes.
Like my job was to deliver a strong message in a way that would stick. And And that was one of the things too that like from being around these other candidates and campaigns, it's like, you know, they're human beings. I'm a human being. We all do our thing. But then everything gets refracted through like this media mirror, because obviously 99.9% of people are not in the room. They're not like watching us deliver these things. So they'll just take cues from whatever,
of course,
from whatever the press says.
This is the game, man.
And this was also during the time period during which like we started having the Yang media blackout, particularly with MSNBC.
Being left off polls and not mentioning
graphics,
stuff,
the whole thing, and it was just ridiculous. Like the most ridiculous was when I qualified for the California debate. I was I was the only non-white candidate on that stage, and it was like a piece of political news that everyone just reports. It's like Andrew Yang qualifies for, debate number 6, and MSNBC wouldn't even report that, because I was curious at the time. I was like, well, they have to report that. I mean, you can't just like pretend that didn't happen. And they did. They were like, and I was like, okay, like this is really ridiculous at this point.
It was tough, really tough to swallow, because like I said, like I thought this would be the point where we start to take off like from the mainstream. And so there's a couple reasons for it, right? One, as I was saying, like they do have a level of trust with voters that the Republicans don't have with the Democrats. Like, mainstream media and the Democrats have a deeper relationship, and you need to get that blessing in the Democratic Party, at least as of today. Like you need that. We did everything we could to not get that in the early days, because we did everything we could because we were being ignored. So we were doing like, hey, look at me all the time. And so once we had finally, let's call it earned the ability to get the mainstream coverage, they didn't want to give it, right? Because we had done all this, let's call it gimmicks or things that they didn't approve of.
I have a slightly different
what do you
take
think
on it.
By the way, I think there's more to it than what I just said, but keep going.
No, I don't think we were going to get it no matter what.
Probably right.
Like it wasn't like, oh, you did these other non-serious things, so now I can't give you serious coverage. It's like they didn't want to cover us from the beginning, and then they didn't want to give us serious coverage.
Yes.
At any point.
And you got that in your mayor's race too, man, where it's like, the left media in particular, they're kingmakers. They find you when you run for city council and then state rep and then local congressional rep and like up the chain. And so there's like, that's what they want. And you think about the candidates they've approved, like even Bernie got a lot of hate too. And he's like not that he was, the sitting senator is like not really off the beaten path, but more so than the rest, right? And so I think to me the biggest example was Amy Klobuchar, which like she had an okay debate. I think she's good, right? But nothing like no world-beating performance in these debates where she got a ton of coverage down the stretch and bumped like 15 points. The message didn't change. The moment didn't change. It wasn't like a core piece of her policy, which I'm not sure what I like the Midwest is the policy there. That nothing of that changed. It was just the press covered her more, right? That earned media piece. And so you needed that blessing. And so the analogy I use in the book is what I call Bud Light marketing, is you need to be. So why does Bud Light advertise? They don't advertise because they have a new product. Or it's Bud Light. It's been the same forever. It doesn't taste like anything. It tastes like water. They advertise to normalize it. So if someone orders a Bud Light, no one gives you a funny look. And Doritos, you go down the list of why these brands advertise. But you were, I say, if we needed to be Bud Light, but you were 420 Sweetwater Pale Ale. You were a Sweetwater, yeah. You're a Sweetwater like craft beer, delicious and like better than Bud Light in every point, right? Where it's like if you want it because it's more locally sourced, or it'll get you drunker, or it tastes better, or it's got a cooler bottle. Like go down the list. But if you did a taste test today, or asked people would they rather have Bud Light or Sweetwater across the country, they would all pick, like the majority pick Bud Light because they're familiar with it. It's less risky. And that's kind of where we're at. And the things we had to do to get attention to get in the game were Sweetwater beer activities. But we needed to get to Bud Light activities. And that wasn't us. And, as I said, this book, what got you here won't get you there. And that's partially true. There's also partially like they weren't ever going to line up behind you. I don't think we could have you could have done it better. And I don't think you come out victorious there either,
So down the stretch of the campaign, thank you, Yang Gang. We're raising money, which means the consultants show up. And then the consultants are like, hey, you need some TV ads. And then we filmed said TV ads. And that was such a trip for me when we were at that point. And I remember you all seeing the ads and being like, oh, like this one, don't like that one as much. But filming them was such a trip. And we spent $7 million on ads in Iowa, where I would get into the hotel at night in Iowa, and then I would turn on the TV, and then there'd be my ad. And then there'd be the Elizabeth Warren ad, and then there'd be the Joe Biden ad.
If you watch TV in Iowa, it's just ad. Yeah, it's awful. God bless the people of Iowa.
We were inundating people. And I remember sitting with the consultants, and they were like, look, we've moved Iowans on all of these things about you, like cares about people like me, has new ideas, understands the economy, wants to have a beer with. Like I was shooting up in all of these measurements. The only measurement I couldn't shoot up on was like, I'm going to vote for this guy to be president of the United States.
Had the experience.
I mean, it's because like has the experience necessary to be president. I scored low on, and so there were a lot of people that were like, well, like Yang, not going to vote for him. Oh, the two things I failed on. Number one, experience, and number two, can defeat Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, the single biggest factor for Democratic primary voters was which of these candidates will beat Donald Trump, and eventually they landed on Joe Biden, which, by the way, happened to be accurate.
It worked,
like Joe.
Well, half the country doesn't believe that, but
yes,
it worked.
He did, but the and that in a way is understandable because if you liked Yang, but you were like, well, this guy's still somewhat new and untested and unproven, are we really going to bet like
the fate of the country on that?
Yeah, on him to defeat Trump? It's like, I'll just go with Joe.
Yep.
And that was that became our reality when caucus night hit in Iowa.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds of people from around the country. Thank you again, Yang Gang, who showed up, volunteered. One guy dislocated his kneecap, and in the ice and snow because it's very cold.
Wild, yeah.
And then still just kept on going in like freaking like a wheelchair. And we got 8,914 votes, which was 24% of the approximately 40,000 that we need. Unfortunately, because of the 15% rule, like
they zero you out pretty quick.
They zero you out pretty quick if you're not above a certain threshold. So the ultimate winners, Bernie got, I think, like 42,000 votes or something like that, which was what I'd projected that we would need initially. So our 5% like displays as 1% because of the 15% rule, and so we ended up with a really tough night. And I got to say, there were different emotions I had during the tail end of the campaign, and we were fighting very hard. We were campaigning very hard. A lot of energy, a lot of volunteers, everything else. The numbers were showing it's like, look, you're having trouble moving your top line. But it was really only when I walked into that polling site, the caucus site in Des Moines, where I was like, oh shit. Like
I remember you saying this.
Yeah, this is not going to be our night.
You lean over like, yeah, this isn't going to go well for us tonight.
Yeah, because you go in and there's like a small pocket of Yang signs that comprised 4 or 5% of the gym, which is about what we got. And then there are signs for everyone else everywhere. And we wound up with 5%, which got zeroed out in that station. But imagine being the candidate. So what happened was I was the only candidate in that gym that night.
Yeah, I mean every candidate goes to one spot.
Yeah, it goes to a different thing. So
this was ours.
Weird if we were all in the same place, but you had different people giving statements on behalf of different campaigns, and then it's like Andrew Yang's here, and then I'm like, then people give me like polite applause, even though most of them are not fans of mine, and I give a nice speech. And then I get warmer applause after the speech, and then a couple people will be like, "Hey, you know what? Like that was good. Yeah, I'm gonna caucus you." I'm like, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah.
But I remember one woman came to me and said, "Please run again."
Yeah.
And I heard that and was like, well, in a way that's like a high compliment, but in a way that's like definitely not caucusing for you tonight.
Yeah. Yep. It was. So yeah, the money in Iowa. So yeah, I have a couple things to say. So one was the strategy where it was like go in. You can go all in Iowa, or you could skip Iowa, go to New Hampshire. You could skip both of them and go to South Carolina or Nevada first. when we lost Iowa, we didn't have a great night. We get zeroed out in Iowa. And the problem with Iowa is that you needed 15% in a whole bunch of districts to even play ball. There's a threshold there. So you can, at 10% in Iowa, theoretically, would be wonderful. But we would have the same exact. We doubled our score. Would have had essentially the same result there, which is why Iowa was bad, like a tough first date. But the problem was, if the whole thing was about press attention, which it was, and we were not getting any, saying that we don't like the traditional process, like fuck you Iowa, we're going to New Hampshire or South Carolina, was not a good way to get legitimacy in mainstream coverage. It was actually a worse way. And you could argue, and that's what happened, I think, with Tulsi and what's his name, the billionaire, Tom Steyer, where they said we're going to go South Carolina directly or go New Hampshire directly, and they got no coverage leading up to the race and then underperformed in both of their states. Because of the lack of coverage. So Iowa got us a good amount of mainstream coverage. If you were on the cover of the Des Moines Register as part of it, like you were in the hunt, but it did suck our momentum.
I looked at it and I think we made the right decision because I agree with you. If you skipped Iowa, then it was like, okay, like what was really going to happen? Were we really going to break out in New Hampshire?
Crush it in New Hampshire after everybody talks about the winner of Iowa?
Yeah,
no.
in that way. I do regret that, and we should talk about the decision to suspend. I do regret that I didn't get to count the votes in Nevada.
You wanted to go to Nevada and South Carolina, yeah.
Yeah, I was just in Nevada last week and had a blast. Thank you, Nevada. But I remember we have a tough night in Iowa, and then I give a speech to Iowan supporters. And then I put a positive face on it because they still hadn't officially counted the votes, and then we're off.
That was
but we kind of knew that
debacle.
That we'd gotten below the threshold, and then we land in New Hampshire for a week of campaigning. Like it was again like event after event. We're off the bus because the buses are too big for the roads in New Hampshire, so we're in rental vehicles and SUVs. And somewhere in the middle of that week, you and the team sit me down and say, "Hey, your call, but we think you should consider suspending the campaign if New Hampshire doesn't go well."
Not a fun combo.
Oh, so what was your lead-in to sit down and have this? Because I just remember being on the receiving end of that convo.
It was, so you're talking with the team, you're like, okay, New Hampshire, like, you basically know a couple days after the caucus, like, all right, are we the story out of Iowa? No. Like, we're getting less coverage than we had before. We put way more money on TV in Iowa than we did New Hampshire. Like, it's not going to go out. It's not going to go well for us. Now, New Hampshire is always a stronger state for us. So, and you don't have to, like, you had open registration, I think. So there was a chance we overperformed, but we weren't confident. And then it was like, okay, we had a movement that we built. And it was, what do we do? Because I was like, I was worried. I was like, I knew you were like, I'm going to the convention. Makes all the sense in the world. And I think that does if you're trying to get the message out and you were like a no-name candidate going out, but you had now become a real candidate. And we were like, I think, talking internally, like, I think if we drag this out, it becomes as, like, you go back, you almost go first full circle back to the illegitimate candidate we were early. And the fear was doing damage to the movement instead of how serious it had become. And so you go out. And the best thing, when you drop out, no one wants the Dems to go back to playing nice again. So the best press coverage you ever got was the night you dropped out. Everybody in the world, all these famous people calling you and telling you how great you are because you're no longer a threat to the status quo. But yeah, like going in is like, I think I remember laying you straight, like, hey, I'll stick with you because I'm your friend, but we're going to have to fire a lot of people. Like, we're not going to raise any money if we do this, if you stay on. But I remember you saying this very clearly, like, okay, we'll have a contingency plan, but we're fighting like fucking hell this week because we're not doing, if we want to drop out, to be lame, we'll do it now. We're not doing that. We're going to fight to win New Hampshire. And if we don't win, then we make the call and we're ready to rock. So yeah, that was a wild week behind the scenes, if you will.
Yeah. And, I remember really enjoying that week in New Hampshire, that there was like also a lot of energy, a lot of volunteers, had some really good events.
Yep.
But
you get the crowds. That wasn't the issue.
Yeah.
People wanted to hang out with you, wanted to beer with you, wanted a photo with you, like the youth vote. It was just actual voting for you. bit of a
but
not my
then the
expertise,
returns
man.
came back that night too, and it was clear relatively early. And,
Well, I know that.
that it wasn't happening. And so
But we
I
got
was
chicken
like,
fingers at Puritans. Still good.
Yes, miss you, New Hampshire. Love you too.
Yeah.
And I remember deciding to suspend, and it was really tough. Like the toughest thing actually was going to Nevada the next day, and people were in tears. I got a lot of messages.
That's right. We had a big thing planned in Nevada the next day.
Saying like, oh, you know what happened? There were a lot of people that were just stunned that it was over. And, you know, looking back on it again, I don't think we made the wrong decision. But yeah, it was a very, very rough period, and it felt like you'd just been running 100 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden, like you're like a cartoon character where you're like running and the ground
runs out. Yep.
So, what a 48 hours that was. That there were a lot of people calling me at that point. Like obviously, all the candidates that were still in it were calling me to congratulate me and nudge me in the way of endorsing them. So that was that was interesting.
Let me ask you this. So one of the things, there's a chapter I took out of the book because it was too negative.
Really?
Or just like hate. It was too much haterade in this chapter. But I'm curious your thoughts. I mean, maybe
outtakes.
Maybe you could cut
Longshot outtakes.
Longshot outtakes. So I wrote a whole chapter on the war on normal people is driven by political consultants. And
oh, dude, this chapter totally gold.
And I took it out. Maybe I'll share it at some point. But I took it out because it had nothing to do with the fucking story. But it was, so I want to, and I've maybe talked about this in the pod before, but like, okay, you're running, I'll just paint this picture for you. If you're running for office, there is no real institutional knowledge for campaigns. You know what I'm saying? Like if you start in like the world of finance, like there's people that have worked at multiple firms and there's like best practices shared across banks and institutions, orgs. And that's true for almost every industry, insurance and education. You go down the list, right? But what is it for politics? Because these campaigns, they die. They're like 6 months to 2 years max, right? And so there's no longevity there. And if you go work on the Hill, that's a separate federally regulated entity than your campaign, right? Those are somewhat federally regulated or whatever they are, state regulated, but it's different. So what's the institutional knowledge for the politics we all know, which is mainly campaigning? And it ends up becoming consultants. And so what happens is you're Andrew Yang and you're running for office, or you're Zach Graumann, you run for office, and what do you need? You need somebody who has press relationships to talk to people. And who has press relationships? It's someone who can stay on to multiple campaigns. That ends up becoming a consultant. You want to get some polling done. Well, who runs polls over and over, can compare them over time? It ends up being a consultant that works with lots of campaigns. You go down the list, like someone who like knows how to fundraise across multiple races. You need a fundraising consultant. You need someone who does research on all of the people in your district, and you're in the state of New York. I've researched all the candidates. Hire a research consultant. The institutional knowledge in politics is consultants. And you have to, the problem is you have to have them because they have relationships you will not have. You can't, no amount of money can help you avoid this shit because you need to hire, someone needs to do political polls. Someone needs to be able to try that are trustworthy. Someone needs to do fucking the comm stuff. So the problem is it's not like a consultant like Bain or McKinsey that you and I would hire when you were an entrepreneur, where they have like aligned incentives with you, generally speaking, where you hire them to do a task. I want you to figure out this XYZ problem, and they come back to you with a report on whether or not you can do it or not, or they bless XYZ. These consultants theoretically are supposed to help you win, but that's not their incentive. Their incentive is to make money and get more clients down the road. So their incentive is to help you win to a point where they don't get embarrassed, and they can lose and still look good. And that is the delta range. That's awful. And for someone like you that's trying to win, they'll never, like a reporter writes something bad about you, and you want to go hammer them, they're going to press you the other direction because they have a relationship with that reporter, and they may need them to write a piece on their next race. They may be working on 4 or 5 other races where that reporter is also writing things. They need that. They think if a pollster they hired came out did a shit job, they may be working with them on other races. May need to work with them in the future. Digital marketing, you go down the list.
There's a political industrial complex that kind of sits on top of everything.
And if you look, this is why I wrote in the chapter. Like, look at Joe Biden's administration. Who are they? They're all political consultants. It's everywhere. They run the fucking world, dude. And like, some are great, some are awful. More awful than great, to be honest with you. But they run everything because that's who ends up working. That's who works on the Hill. That's who works in the staffers. They just becomes a way to make, and that's the real way to make money in politics. So yeah, I don't know your thoughts on this, but this irked me big time.
Well, I think that hits home for a lot of people, and it's one reason why people are so fed up and frustrated. It's like these forces kind of keep the status quo in place.
Yes.
That there's a lot of money built in, and if you go against the machine, then the machine tries to stick it to you in various ways.
And the machine is powerful because they can easily build up another candidate very quickly. Very quickly. And it takes a Trump. The reality is, like, Trump was able to bulldoze his way through all this because he was, not only was he super rich, people forget, but he was 99.9% name recognition.
Super famous.
Super famous. And that's rare. Those combos are almost, Elon Musk is the only one, I think, right now.
And then he overrode a party that was very, very institutionally weak.
Yes.
Was filled with voters who did not care.
Didn't give a shit
about the establishment. So this is my fundamental insight and why I started the Forward Party.
Yeah.
Was that people on the left who want to do the same thing to the Democratic Party? I'm like, no, it's going to be much, much harder than the Democratic Party because 69% trust the media, because half of them want the party to become more conservative, not less, because they're going to kneecap you at every turn. And the example I use is, look, Democrats at 75% of the legislature in California, a governor who ran on single-parent health care couldn't even bring it to a vote. You know, like the machine.
I love that story, by the way, for your example. Yeah.
At this point, the Democratic Party and the machine are 85% overlapping. And so you're like, oh, I'm going to like turn the machine to all these other ends. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like
if you get Bernie and put all the establishment, voters aren't going to follow. They, like to your point, they want to be more conservative. Like, it's not, the far left doesn't have the support that the far right does in terms of its like ability to bulldoze.
Well, they're trying to bulldoze a much stronger.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Yes.
You know, it's like you have like all these roadblocks. In terms of the money, I mean, you're looking at like billions of dollars that's poured into the coffers of the Democratic Party, which also is going to be a force for status quo.
Yes.
Because any meaningful change you want to make is going to end up running afoul of like a whole panoply of corporate interests.
Yes. And this is like, if you look at Cory Booker, and we like Cory Booker. I like him a lot. But you look at Cory Booker when he was like mayor of Newark to who he is today in terms of substance of what he says, it's night and day. And it's nothing against Cory Booker, frankly, seriously, because it's human nature to do this. But you start off and you're idealistic and you're real and you're fucking bucking the trends and you're doing your thing. But you have to raise money. And crowdfunding is frankly a recent thing, which wasn't a huge thing with Cory when Cory was taking off. So you end up going to what they call bundlers, who are people that know a whole bunch of other rich people who love politics. And they can say, hey, I'll raise you $100,000 plus. And they get lots and lots of rich people to come to your events. Now, what happens? You meet all these people. They have your phone number. They're max donors. They blah, blah, blah. And you end up listening to them. And it's just years and years and years of these people dripping in your head. And it's a small subset of people, and they're all highly political. So what do they read? What does that mean? They're reading the New York Times, and they're listening to MSNBC, and they're following Politico, and they're not in touch with reality the way the average Americans are. And you end up skewing towards either nothing or like just a puppet.
Yeah, I think max donors represent, I want to say it was literally like a fraction of a percent of the American public.
It's 69,000 people.
Yeah, so it's it's not a normal perspective. I was actually thinking of the corporate layer of money, like the billions of dollars that are right on top of it. Where you talk about the two major parties, like there's a ton of money. Like everything, you look at the National Convention, it's like wall-to-wall corporate sponsors and everything else. So
what did AOC said? She walked in and Goldman Sachs was the sponsor for her orientation. Like orientation. You fucking kidding me?
Yeah. So
come on.
So what's wild is that we had an amazingly successful campaign, and yet to your point, like we still didn't truly come close to winning.
Yeah.
In the way that there were moments when it's like, oh my gosh, like the people are behind us, we can do this thing. Like the machinery on this side is stronger than it is on the other side.
Yes.
And that was one of my big learnings. I'm now still, by the way, grinding to try and find ways around the machine to upend the machine. I think the Forward Party is a real historic opportunity because the two-party system is so decrepit and ossified, and people aren't loyal to it. But we had to run the campaign to know what we know. And what's interesting too is like if I, it's like you said, it's like you look back at it, and this is not a story in my mind. It's like, oh, if we just done that one thing differently or made this other decision, then like I won. Like that.
Good point.
Like I don't feel that.
No, I don't either. I don't have any regrets really because it wouldn't have mattered.
I don't have regrets in that way either. I mean, did we make mistakes? Yes.
Oh, I want to be clear. I made all the mistakes. Like all of them.
And if you want to get a sense of some of Zach's mistakes, you should definitely read Longshot.
There you go.
But the crucial elements in my mind were not within our control.
Yeah.
And so it's something that it's like I feel really proud of and pumped by what we accomplished. And the question now is, can we continue to build and adapt and innovate and keep making awesome things happen for people?
And that is actually the point of this book. Just get way close. Is like the point of the book is that the game has changed. Like we were living proof that this game is changing.
Yeah, and no one thought we could do what we did.
The gatekeepers of power from traditional politics of old, like their structures are cracking. They're not cracked. I think they're more cracked than the Republican side. But generally speaking, they're cracking, but they're not done yet. But the trend is going the way you want it to. The trend is going more populist. It is becoming more and more likely that more and more Andrew Yangs start existing and popping up, which is exciting. And I think politics in the future is going to look very different, which is, I hope, a good thing. There's some, it's tough to compromise when you're a type of, I talk about identity brands. It's tough to compromise from your strong positions on certain things. But over time, I'm optimistic on where this goes, and I do think Forward Party in itself mechanically might be one of the things that actually creates a bigger wedge in some of these cracks. So,
well, I think things are changing, man. I think the challenge for us is really to see some of those changes be positive as opposed to some of the negative changes. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like some very negative things are now possible and on the table.
That's true.
And let's get some positive things.
That's my goal nowadays. Like I'm choosing to be happy, man. Like I'm choosing just glass half full.
Well, you should be very, very happy and proud of this accomplishment. My campaign would never have reached millions without Zach's leadership and strategies. Anyone who wants to make change in the world or who simply loves an incredible story that you all made possible. So thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Read this book.
To all the staffers and everybody, like, look, my name's on the cover, but I'm just literally getting credit for a lot of the work an incredible team did. So
now you know how I feel, bro.
We love you guys. We'll see you next week.